I didn't believe in lake monsters, not in a serious way at least. Champ was just one of those names you hear attached to old water, like something fishermen say when the nights get too quiet or when the bottle starts running low. Like Lake Champion, Lake Champlain itself didn't look dangerous when I first saw it. It looked patient, too wide to feel honest, too still to feel empty. I remember standing near the shoreline that first evening, watching the water take light from the sky and give almost nothing back. No reflection felt complete. Everything on the surface looked slightly delayed, like the lake wasn't reacting in real time. Someone nearby laughed and said, "That's champ for you." Like that explained everything. I turned to the man who said it, an older local, working the docks, hands rough from rope and cold water. I asked him straight, what exactly it champ supposed to be? He didn't answer immediately. He just looked at the lake for a long time, like he was waiting for it to agree with him. Then he said something I didn't expect. "Depends on when you ask it." I frowned. That's not an answer. He nodded slowly. "It never is." That should have been the end of it for me. One of those vague folklore responses people give when they want to sound mysterious without saying anything real. But then he added something else, lower voice. "No one sees champ the same way twice." They stayed with me longer than it should have because that doesn't sound like folklore. That sounds like inconsistency, like error, like something that doesn't hold a fixed shape in memory. That night I stayed near the lake longer than I planned. Most people left when the light faded. Tourists, locals, fishermen. Everyone seemed to agree on one thing without saying it. You don't stay near Champlain after dark unless you have a reason. I didn't have one. Not a good one anyway. But I stayed anyway. Because I wanted to understand why a place that looks so calm carries a name like that. The wind picked up slightly around midnight. No strong, just enough to disturb the surface. And that's when I noticed it. The water wasn't moving actually. Not like waves, not like wind. It was stretching. Long, slow ripples moving in a direction that didn't match anything around it. No boats, no current, no visible cause. Just a line of disturbance moving across the lake like something underneath was adjusting its position. I leaned forward slightly without realizing it, and for a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw something rise just beneath the surface. Not break through, not emerge, just get close enough that the water changed shape around it. Then it was gone. No splash, no sound, just stillness again, too quickly, like nothing had happened at all. But the lake didn't feel the same after that, neither did I. And that was the first time I understood something important about Champ. It's not described as something that attacks. It's described as something that appears wrong for a second and then corrects itself. I stayed there a while longer, just watching, waiting for it to make the same mistake again, but the lake didn't repeat itself. It never does, not on the first night. The next morning I did what I always do when something doesn't make sense. I started digging into records, old newspapers, local archives, anything that could tell me when this champ idea actually started taking shape. That's where the problem began. There isn't one origin, there are many, and none of them match. The earliest written mention I found was from the late 1800s, small, almost casual notes in regional papers around Lake Champlain. Nothing dramatic at first, no monster sketches, no bold claims, just descriptions people tried to explain away immediately. Large object moving underwater near ferry route, unusual wake observed in calm conditions. long dark shape seen beneath surface, duration too brief for confirmation. Even the language is careful, hesitant, like whoever wrote it didn't want to commit to what they saw. But what stood out wasn't the sightings, it was the pattern. They didn't describe fish or debris or drifting logs. They described something that moved with intention but without clarity. That combination kept appearing again and again. I spoke to a local historian near Burlington that afternoon, an older woman who had spent most of her life studying Champlain Valley records. When I mentioned Champ, she said, didn't smile, didn't dismiss it. She just sighed, like she'd heard the question too many times from people who thought they were the first to ask it properly. "You're not the first person to notice the gaps," she said. That caught my attention. "Gaps?" I asked. She pulled out a folder from the desk, photocopies of old reports, newspaper clippings, handwritten notes from fishermen dating back over a century. "They don't line up," she said. "Not in time, not in description, not even in location." I looked down at the papers and she was right. Some sightings described something long and serpentine near the northern end of the lake. Others placed it near the southern narrows. Some reports were weeks apart. Others claimed similar sightings on the same day by people who had never spoken to each other. Different angles, different shapes, same name later attached to all of them, Champ. I asked her the obvious question. Couldn't it just be misidentification? Fish, waves, boats? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned back in her chair and looked at me carefully. "That's what everyone says at first," she replied. A pause, until they realized something uncomfortable. I waited. She continued, "The lake is too consistent to produce that many different mistakes." That didn't make sense at first glance, but the more I thought about it, the more it stuck. Because mistakes usually repeat in predictable ways, light reflections, known animals, familiar distortions, but the Champlain's reports didn't behave like that. They evolved. Early descriptions were vague, just movement underwater. Later reports became more specific, length estimates, motion patterns, partial surfacing, and then something even stranger happened. In the mid-20th century, sightings started including behavior, not just something seen, but something reacting. One report mentioned a long shape moving parallel to a boat for several minutes before disappearing suddenly as if it had chosen to leave. Another described something surfacing briefly, then submerging only when a second boat approached. That detail stayed with me because it implies awareness, not instinct. Awareness. That evening, I went back to the lake. Different spot this time, closer to where older records placed the most consistent sightings. A narrow stretch of water where currents tightened slightly between shores. The locals call it one of the watch points, though no one explains why. I waited for a long time. Nothing happened, just wind across water, distant boat lights, normal silence. Then I noticed something small, too small to matter at first, a ripple that didn't match the direction of the wind. Then another and another, not random, not scattered, a line forming, slowly, like something just below the surface was moving in a path it already knew. I didn't move, didn't breathe much, because I recognized the feeling from the night before. That same unnatural delay in the lake's response, and this time I didn't look away. The disturbance didn't rise, didn't reveal itself. It simply passed through the water like a thought moving through silence, and then, just as before, it stopped existing. No trace, no explanation, only the lake again, pretending nothing had changed. But I had seen enough now to understand something simple. Champ is not consistent because people are mistaken. Champ is inconsistent because whatever is beneath that water does not present itself the same way twice. And that realization made the lake feel larger than it should have, not in size, in possibility. By the third day, I stopped trusting single reports, not because they were unreliable, but because Lake Champlain never seemed to rely on just one person at a time. That was the pattern I kept seeing. Multiple witnesses, same moment, same lake, different descriptions, and somehow all of them felt honest. That's what made it worse. I went back through one of the most cited early accounts, what locals call the Burlington incident, though the name came much later. It wasn't one report, it was three. Same afternoon, same stretch of water, same calm conditions. The first witness was a ferry operator. He described seeing something long and dark moving under the surface beside his vessel, not crossing, not drifting, following. He said it kept pace with the ferry for nearly 5 minutes before suddenly dropping deeper as if it had decided the game was over. The second witness was a passenger on the same ferry. She described something completely different. Not a single shape, but multiple humps breaking just under the surface, like a line of movement traveling together. She swore it looked like several creatures moving in coordination. The third report came from a dock worker on shore. He saw something else entirely. A single disturbance in the water, wide, slow, and circular, like something massive had turned just beneath the surface without surfacing at all. Same moment, same location, three incompatible realities. I remember sitting with those reports in my hands and feeling something uncomfortable form in my thoughts. It wasn't confusion, it was pattern mismatch, because in normal cases, eyewitness variation still orbits a core similarity. Here, there was no core, only interpretation. I met a retired fisherman that evening near a small marina north of Shelburne Bay. He didn't want to talk at first, most of them don't, but when I mentioned Champ, he didn't laugh. He just said one sentence. "You're asking the wrong question, buddy." I asked him what the right one was. He looked out at the water for a long time before answering. "Not what it is," he said, "what it does when it notices you." That stayed with me, because it assumes awareness again, not chance, not accident, but response. He told me about a night in the late 90s when he was out alone on the lake. No wind, no traffic, just engine noise and open water. Then his sonar stopped behaving normally. At first he thought it was malfunctioning, common enough on old equipment, but then the readings changed. Not noise, not static, a shape, long, moving parallel beneath him at a constant depth. He tried to adjust course, the shape adjusted with him, always keeping the same distance, not closing in, not falling behind, matching. I asked him if he saw it. He shook his head. "No, I never saw it. But I felt it stop when I stopped thinking about it." That sentence didn't make sense at first, so I asked him to explain. He didn't. Instead, he said something else. "The moment you stop reacting like you found something, it stops behaving like it's there." That was the second time I heard something like that. A behavioral response, not physical interaction, but observation sensitivity. I didn't say anything after that, just listened, because I was starting to notice a pattern in the people who had the strongest accounts. They didn't describe attacks, they described awareness loops. And somewhere, something under the water that reacts not to presence but to attention. That night I went out alone again, different shoreline, quieter stretch, less light pollution. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I just stood there watching the lake settle into its nighttime version of silence. And I tried something. I stopped looking for it, not physically, mentally. I stopped expecting movement, stopped predicting shape, stopped searching for the thing I had already decided might be there. At first, nothing changed. The lake remained still. Then slowly, the stillness changed character, not breaking, not moving, just reorganizing. Like the water was settling into a different kind of balance. And for a brief moment, I felt something I can only describe as being noticed without being identified. No shape, no sound, no surface disturbance, just the sensation that the lake had adjusted its attention. Then it stopped. Everything returned to normal. Waves resumed, wind returned, distance came back. But I didn't move for a long time after that because I understood something I wasn't ready to fully accept yet. Champ is not just seen, it is co regulated by perception, and whatever people call it doesn't behave the same way when it knows it is being studied. By the fourth segment of any story like this, you usually expect escalation, bigger sightings, clearer evidence, something dramatic enough to settle the debate, but Champ doesn't escalate like that, it complicates. That's what I realized when I reached the first serious capture attempt in the historical record, something locals still refer to half seriously as the Port Henry expedition. It happened in the early 1970s when interest in lake monsters was peaking again across North America. Cryptozoology was gaining attention, and Champ, already a well established local legend, became a natural target for proof. This wasn't a fisherman with a camera, this was a coordinated group: scientists, local officials, amateur researchers, even journalists. They came with sonar equipment, underwater cameras, tracking devices, the full effort to finally settle whether Lake Champlain held anything unusual at all. And for the first time in the recorded history of Champ sightings, something responded to them in real time. The sonar readings picked it up first, a long, continuous object moving beneath the boat grid they had set up. Not erratic, not random, structured movement. One of the researchers described it as too smooth to be biological. That phrase appears in multiple notes from the expedition. Too smooth, too consistent, too coordinated. At first, they thought they had finally done it, found the anomaly, locked onto it. They adjusted positioning, narrowed tracking, focused equipment, and that's when things changed, because instead of approaching the device, the object beneath the water began to mirror the operation. Every time they shifted the sonar grid, the object adjusted its path. Every time they narrowed the detection field, it moved just outside it, not escaping, avoiding. That distinction matters. One implies fear, the other implies understanding. One of the technicians wrote something later that never made it into the official report. It feels like it knows what are we trying to conclude. That line was removed from the published version, but it survives in archived notes. Then came the cameras. They deployed underwater filming rigs at fixed pad depths, designed to capture anything passing through the monitored zones. For hours, nothing appeared. Then one camera feed went dark, not because of failure, because something passed directly in front of it. The backup footage showed only distortion, a long shadow crossing the lens, not from a distance but at near contact range. But here's where the story shifts, because no physical object was recovered, no damage to equipment consistent with impact, no structural disturbance in the lake bed, just absence of usable data. And that's when the expedition fell apart, not because something attacked them, but because nothing they tried produced consistent results. One group saw sonar contact, another saw empty water, one camera recorded movement, another, mounted meters away, recorded nothing at all. Same moment, same lake, different realities. By the end of the week, the project was quietly shut down. Official explanation: inconclusive environmental interference. Wow. Unofficial reaction: most participants refused to return to the lake for further study. One of them reportedly said, "We didn't fail to find it, we failed to make it stay consistent long enough to define." That line stuck with me because it suggests something uncomfortable. Champ is not hidden, Champ is unstable under measurement. And that is very different from everything else people try to compare it to. Because animals don't become inconsistent when observed, but systems that respond to observation do. That's when I started questioning something deeper. Not whether Champ existed, but whether Champ is even a single thing in the first place. Because every attempt to capture it produces the same result: partial confirmation followed by contradiction. Always enough to believe, never enough to conclude. And that's the real pattern. Not a creature, not a serpent, but a phenomena that refuses to stabilize under attention. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized something unsettling. Every serious attempt to prove Champ's existence doesn't just fail, it changes what people think they saw. And that means the lake isn't just responding to equipment, it might be responding to expectation itself. The first time I saw the photo, I didn't react, not because it was unimpressive, but because it didn't behave like evidence is supposed to behave. It was the most famous image ever linked to Champ, taken in 1977 near Burlington Bay by a local couple on a small recreational boat. At first glance, it looks simple enough: dark water, soft waves, midday light, and then, just beneath the surface, a long, dark shape, curved, continuous, moving just enough to suggest life, but not enough to define form. No head, no tail, no clear anatomy, just presence. The photograph spread fast. Newspapers called it the clearest image of a lake monster in North America. Cryptozoologists called it the first real proof. Skeptics called it a trick of light, boat wake, or floating debris, but none of those explanations fully held up when examined closely, because the shape in the water doesn't behave like a wave pattern. It doesn't break naturally, it doesn't taper like driftwood, and it doesn't distort like a reflection. It holds continuity. That's what makes it difficult to dismiss completely, but also impossible to confirm. I tracked down analysis reports of the image, optical breakdowns, shoreline mapping, water depth calculations. Every technical review ended in the same place: inconclusive due to insufficient reference stability. That phrase appears again: stability, or lack of it. Then I found something more interesting. The original photographer's statement: he didn't describe excitement, he didn't describe fear, he described confusion. He said they were taking casual photos of the lake when something changed the water. Not moved, not disturbed, changed. He said the surface looked different in one specific area, like the lake had become thicker here. When they zoomed in later, that's when they saw the shape. But here's where the story fractures again. His wife, standing next to him at the time, gave a different account entirely. She said she didn't see anything unusual until after he pointed it out. And even then, she described it just as shadows under waves. Same moment, same camera, two incompatible perceptions. That detail is what pushed this photograph from evidence into controversy, but because unlike blurry cryptid images from forests or deserts, this one has controlled conditions, fixed position, known lighting, documented timing, and yet still no agreement on what was actually seen. That's when I started doing something I hadn't done before. I stopped asking what the photo shows and started asking why it allows disagreement. Because most photographs lock interpretation, they reduce uncertainty. This one does the opposite: it expands it. The more people analyze it, the more interpretations appear: a true John, a wave pattern, boat shadow, a reflection artifact, and Champ, all of them fit. None of them fully resolved, which means the image is not stabilizing perception. It is distributing it. I went back to the shoreline again that night. Same stretch of water as before. This time I brought a printed copy of the photograph. I didn't study it. I just held it, letting the lake sit behind it, and I noticed something strange. When I looked at the water directly, it felt normal. But when I looked at the photo and then back at the lake felt slightly different. Not physically, perceptually, like my brain was trying to reconcile two overlapping versions of the same surface. And that's when something occurred to me. What if Champ isn't something that appears in the lake, but something that appears in interpretation of the lake? Because every confirmed sighting, every photo, every sonar reading doesn't converge into a single form. It diverges into multiple possibilities, and somehow the lake always allows all of them to remain valid at the same time. That night, I stood there longer than I intended, waiting for the water to decide which version of reality it wanted to present. It didn't. It just stayed still, as if it was aware that being observed no longer required it to reveal anything consistent. And for the first time, I understood why Champ has survived for so long in American folklore. It doesn't need to be seen clearly, it only needs to be seen differently by everyone who looks at it. And that makes it impossible to finish, because you can't prove something that never settles into one shape. Modern reports are supposed to settle things. That's the whole point of modern equipment: sonar, GPS mapping, underwater imaging, synchronized recording systems. If something exists, it should show up the same way across all tools. But Lake Champlain refuses that rule. I found the most unsettling cluster of reports in the early 2000s when a small research group ran a multi-sensor survey across the central basin of the lake. This wasn't folklore anymore, this was controlled monitoring. Three systems running at once: surface observation, visual tracking, sonar mapping, subsurface detection, and synchronized video recording, all aimed at one thing: to finally confirm or deny Champ. At first, everything behaved normally. Clear water readings, no anomalies, standard lake activity. Then, during one of the night passes, something appeared. Sonar picked it up first. A long, continuous shape beneath the boat path. Stable depth, smooth movement, no erratic behavior. One of the technicians reportedly said, "Whatever that is, it's not fish." That should have been the moment everything aligned, but it wasn't, because at the exact same time, the surface observers saw nothing. No wake, no shadow, no distortion, just still water under moonlight. So they checked video. Nothing again. Clear frame, no disturbance, but sonar insisted something was there, moving, parallel, coordinated. Then the contradiction began to widen. One technician adjusted the sonar again. The shape changed, not in position but in definition. It became longer, then thinner, then fragmented, as if the system itself couldn't agree on what it was detecting. And that's when something truly unsettling happened. The surface team suddenly reported movement, a ripple pattern forming in the exact area where sonar indicated the object, but sonar, at the same moment, showed nothing. A complete drop, zero detection, same coordinates, same timestamp, two realities, one lake. I remember reading the field notes from one of the researchers. He wrote something that wasn't part of the official report. It feels like the lake is choosing which instrument is allowed to be right. That sentence stayed with me longer than anything else, because instruments don't get denied. They fail or they succeed. They don't alternate with truth depending on perspective. But here they did. They tried again the next night, recalibrated everything, new equipment, fresh sensors, cross-verified systems, and the same thing happened. Sonar detected structure, cameras showed nothing, observers saw faint surface disruption. Sonar dropped the reading completely. Video showed a faint blur that didn't correspond to any sonar data. It wasn't malfunction, it was asymmetry. Each system was capturing something different, but all at the same coordinates, and none of them agreed. That's when the project lead reportedly stopped the operation for the night, not because of fear, but because of confusion. He allegedly said, if we can't make the data converge, we don't have a phenomena. We have interpretations fighting each other. But that wasn't the end of it, because one of the junior researchers stayed behind and recorded something unofficial. He left a personal log entry that never made it into publication. When I stopped trying to correlate the sonar with what I could see, everything stabilized. That's the key line, because it suggests something impossible for normal physics. The lake wasn't inconsistent, it was reactive to correlation. The moment they tried to force agreement between systems, the disagreement increased, and when they stopped trying to unify it, their readings became stable again, separate but stable. That's when the group abandoned the idea of capturing Champ as a single entity, because the data stopped supporting the idea of one thing. Instead, it suggested something far more uncomfortable, that whatever is under Lake Champlain does not exist as a single fixed form during observation. It behaves like a system that distributes itself across perception tools, not hiding, not escaping, but splitting across whatever is used to define it. I stood at the lake again after reading that report, and I tried to imagine it differently, not as a creature underwater, but as something that only becomes one thing when we force all perspectives into agreement. And maybe that's the mistake. Maybe Champ isn't something you find. Maybe it's something that only appears when you stop letting your tools argue with each other. Because if everything disagrees, then nothing can be confirmed. And if nothing can be confirmed, then it never has to settle. By this point, I stopped treating Champ like a mystery to solve. That's the mistake most people make. They think repetition leads to clarity. But Lake Champlain doesn't reward repetition, it reacts to it. I started going back through long-term observation logs, decades of sightings, patterns, and field notes from different groups who had studied the lake over time. And something began to stand out that no one talks about directly. The lake doesn't just produce sightings, it produces changes in how people report sightings. Early witnesses describe vague movement. Late witnesses become more precise, even when they've never read earlier accounts, even when they have no prior knowledge of the legend. It's as if the lake itself adjusts what it allows people to notice. I found one study from a regional environmental monitoring group that tried a simple approach: same location, same time of day, same equipment, repeated over months. At first, nothing unusual. Then, gradually, small shifts appeared. A faint sonar anomaly, then a recurring surface ripple pattern, then intermittent visual distortions recorded by camera only during certain observation intervals. But here's the part that changed everything for me. When they paused observation for a few weeks and returned, the patterns changed, not disappeared, changed. Different path, different movement profile, different behavior. One researcher wrote, "It feels like we're not tracking something consistent, we're tracking something that updates based on how often we look." That line stayed with me because it implies learning, not biological learning, observational learning, adaptation to scrutiny itself. I went back to the lake again that night, same shoreline, same conditions as before. This time I didn't bring equipment, no camera, no recording, just observation. And I tried something different. I didn't try to identify anything. I didn't try to correlate sound, movement, or reflection. I just watched without building interpretation. At first, nothing happened. The lake remained still in its usual way. Wind moved across the surface. Light faded into a soft gradient over the water. Normal, predictable. Then I noticed something subtle. Not movement, delay. A slight hesitation in how the water responded to wind, as if the surface was deciding whether to behave like water or something else. Then it shifted. A faint line of disturbance formed near the center of my field of view, very faint, almost invisible, but it didn't behave like a wave. It didn't spread outward. It held shape, like it was waiting. I didn't react, not outwardly, but internally. I was aware of something important happening because this wasn't like the earlier sightings when observation triggered change. This felt different. It felt like the lake of interpretation was itself a condition. The longer I avoided assigning meaning to what I was seeing, the more stable the phenomena became. That's when I understood something deeply unsettling. Champ is not reacting to being seen, it is reacting to being defined. The moment you decide what it is, it adjusts away from that definition, not to hide, but to prevent stabilization, because stabilization means conclusion, and conclusion means the end of variability, and variability seems to be the only constant it maintains. I stayed there for a long time, watching the faint disturbance without trying to turn it into anything else. No creator, no shape, no narrative, just movement that refused to become fixed. And slowly, it faded. Not suddenly, not like disappearance, like acceptance. As if the lake had finished presenting that version of itself for now. I walked back that night with something sitting heavily in my thoughts because I realized something no one in the reports ever says directly. Every study of Champ doesn't just fail to capture it, it changes what the researchers think capture means. Over time, their definitions shift, their expectations shift, even their language begins to adjust, and that means the phenomena doesn't just exist in the lake, it exists in the process of studying the lake, which is why every decade produces a new version of Champ. Not because it changes randomly, but because the observers do, and the lake reflects that back in the only way it can, through something that never settles into one form long enough to be finished.